Auntie, by any chance, don't you need a baby? Take my little brother. He's 5 months old and very hungry. Upon hearing this, the woman turned around and froze when she saw an 11-year-old boy holding a baby in his arms. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more emotional stories like this one, and leave your like on the video to keep watching. The Sunday market in Bath's Guildhall Square buzzed with the familiar weekend energy that Eleanor Blackwood had grown to appreciate since moving to the historic city 3 years ago. Stalls of artisanal cheeses, handcrafted jewelry, and fresh produce from the Somerset countryside formed a patchwork of colors against the honey-colored Georgian buildings. Eleanor, a woman of 42 with chestnut hair that caught the rare English sunlight, moved methodically from vendor to vendor, filling her canvas bag with ingredients for the week ahead. Life hadn't worked out as she'd planned. Her publishing house job as a senior editor kept her comfortable in her modest terraced house on Camden Road. But the emptiness that had settled in her chest after her divorce from James and the devastating news from her doctor remained a constant companion. Unlikely to conceive naturally, the specialist had said with clinical detachment, leaving Eleanor to piece together a life different from the one she had envisioned, one without the children she had always dreamed of raising. She paused at a stall selling hand-carved wooden toys, her fingers tracing the smooth edge of a miniature sailing boat. It reminded her of her grandfather, who had taught her to whittle during summers in Cornwall, a hobby she'd abandoned when adult responsibilities took over. "Excuse me," a small voice came from somewhere near her elbow. "Miss?" Eleanor turned to find a boy, no older than 11, with unruly brown hair and eyes too serious for his age. He wore a navy jumper with frayed cuffs and clutched something to his chest, a bundle wrapped in what appeared to be a baby blanket. "Yes?" Eleanor replied, bending slightly to meet the boy's gaze. Are you good with babies?" The question came out uncertain, wavering. It was then that Eleanor realized the bundle in his arms was moving. The blanket shifted, revealing a tiny face, a baby, with round cheeks and curious eyes, no more than a few months old. "I've had some experience," she answered cautiously, a growing unease settling in her stomach. "Is everything all right?" The boy, Oliver, as she would soon learn, glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "His name is Charlie. He's my brother. He's 5 months old, and he needs someone to look after him properly." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom said I could give him to someone who wants him." "Do you want him?" Eleanor's heart stopped. The marketplace continued its Sunday rhythm around them, but time seemed to suspend in the small space between her and this desperate child holding an infant. "Where is your mother?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Oliver pointed vaguely toward the edge of the market where a woman leaned against a wall, her posture unsteady. Even from a distance, Eleanor could see her disheveled appearance and the unmistakable sway of someone under the influence. "She doesn't want to be bothered," Oliver explained with the matter-of-fact tone children use when they've accepted difficult truths. "Charlie cries too much, and she says she can't afford him anyway. I've been taking care of him, but I don't know how to do it right." His eyes, blue and imploring, met Eleanor's. "Please? You look nice?" Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her. Every instinct told her to call the authorities immediately, but the vulnerability in the boy's expression stopped her. She'd seen that same look in her own reflection after the doctor delivered his verdict. Lost, searching for solid ground. "Oliver," she said gently, having caught the name from the worn label on his school bag. "I can't just take your brother. That's not how it works. But I can help you both. Are you hungry?" The boy's hesitation told her everything. He nodded slightly, adjusting his grip on Charlie, who had begun to fuss. "There's a cafe just around the corner. Let's get something to eat and we can talk," Eleanor suggested, careful not to make any promises she couldn't keep. "Is that all right?" Oliver looked back at his mother, who had slid down the wall to sit on the pavement, head tilted back, oblivious to her surroundings. "She won't notice," he said quietly. "She doesn't notice much these days." At the small cafe on Northumberland Place, Eleanor ordered sandwiches, milk for Oliver, and asked for a bottle warmer for the formula that Oliver produced from a tattered backpack. The boy knew the routine: how to test the temperature on his wrist, how to position Charlie in his arms. The expertise born of necessity broke Eleanor's heart. "How long have you been looking after Charlie?" she asked, watching Oliver's careful movements. "Since he was born, mostly," Oliver replied, his focus on his brother. "Mom was okay at first, but then she started drinking more. She lost her job at the hotel, and now she just sleeps a lot. Or goes out." He adjusted the bottle as Charlie's tiny hands reached up to hold it. "The neighbors help sometimes, but Mrs. Winters moved away last month, and Mr. Jenkins works nights." Eleanor's mind raced through options. She should call social services. That was the proper procedure. But she'd heard enough stories about overloaded systems and siblings separated in foster care to hesitate. "Do you have any other family? Grandparents? Aunts or uncles?" Oliver shook his head. "Dad left before Charlie was born. Mom says her parents are dead, and she doesn't talk to her sister anymore." As they finished their meal, Eleanor made a decision that would alter the course of her carefully ordered life. "Oliver, I want to help you and Charlie, but I need to do it the right way. I have a spare room in my house. You both can stay there tonight, and tomorrow we'll sort things out properly." The relief on Oliver's face was immediate and profound. "Really? But what about Mum?" Eleanor chose her words carefully. "We'll need to talk to her. She needs to know where you are, and she might need some help, too." She pulled out her phone. "I should let her know now." "She won't answer her phone," Oliver said, his voice flat. "It got cut off last week." "Then we'll have to go back and speak to her directly," Eleanor replied, though the prospect filled her with apprehension. As they approached Rachel, Oliver's mother, Eleanor's concern deepened. The woman, who couldn't have been more than 30, had the weathered appearance of someone much older. Her blonde hair hung in limp strands around a face once beautiful, but now marked by the harsh lines of addiction. "Rachel?" Eleanor began tentatively. "My name is Eleanor Blackwood. Oliver and Charlie are going to come with me for a meal and some rest." She kept her tone firm but non-confrontational. "Here's my address and phone number. You're welcome to come too if you'd like." Rachel's bloodshot eyes struggled to focus. "Who are you?" she slurred, pushing herself up straighter. "I'm offering to help," Eleanor replied simply. Rachel's gaze drifted to her sons, then back to Eleanor. A flash of something, guilt perhaps, or relief, crossed her face before hardening into suspicion. "What do you want with my kids?" "Nothing," Eleanor assured her. "Just to make sure they're safe and fed tonight." A moment of clarity seemed to break through Rachel's haze. "You one of those social workers?" "No," Eleanor said truthfully. "I'm just someone who wants to help." Rachel studied her for a long moment before her shoulders slumped in defeat or acceptance. Eleanor couldn't tell which. "Whatever. They'll be better off with you anyway." She fumbled in her pocket and produced a crumpled piece of paper. "That's my sister's number in Bristol. Tell her I tried, all right?" As Eleanor guided Oliver and Charlie toward her car, a hollow victory settled in her chest. This wasn't how she'd imagined motherhood would find her, but perhaps some paths are discovered rather than planned. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders as they drove through the ancient streets of Bath toward her home. A journey of mere minutes that would stretch into a life-changing odyssey. What Eleanor couldn't know then was that Rachel would appear at her doorstep at 3 in the morning, demanding money in exchange for leaving her children in Eleanor's care. A desperate proposition that would set in motion a battle for not just the children's future, but for Eleanor's chance at the family she never thought she'd have. Eleanor woke to the sound of insistent pounding on her front door. The illuminated face of her bedside clock read 3:79 a.m. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind before the events of the previous day rushed back. Oliver, baby Charlie, their troubled mother. She had spent the evening settling the boys into her spare room, marveling at how quickly her orderly home had transformed. Baby supplies hastily purchased from the late-night Tesco now cluttered her kitchen counter. The spare room, once a sterile guest space, now held 2 sleeping children. Oliver curled protectively around his brother on the double bed, despite the makeshift cot Eleanor had assembled for Charlie. The pounding came again, more forceful this time, accompanied by a voice. "Open the bloody door! I know they're in there!" Eleanor slipped on her dressing gown and hurried downstairs, pulse racing. Through the peephole, she saw Rachel, more alert than she'd been at the market, but with a dangerous edge to her movements. "Rachel," Eleanor said, as she opened the door cautiously, keeping the security chain in place. "It's the middle of the night. The boys are sleeping." "Let me in," Rachel demanded, her words clear but her eyes wild. "Those are my kids. I want them back." "You said they could stay with me," Eleanor reminded her gently. "Oliver and Charlie are safe and comfortable. We can talk about this in the morning when—" "I don't want to talk," Rachel interrupted, her voice rising. "I want what's mine, or I want compensation." Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "Compensation? 500 pounds, Rachel stated flatly. "That's what it'll cost you to keep them for a month. Think of it as child care fees." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Cheaper than most nurseries in Bath, I'd wager." Eleanor's mind reeled. Was this woman actually trying to sell her own children? "Rachel, you need help. This isn't right. Let me call someone." "Don't patronize me," Rachel snarled, pushing against the door. The security chain held, but Eleanor could see the desperation in the younger woman's face. "You think you're better than me? With your nice house and your fancy job? You don't know what it's like trying to keep 2 kids alive on nothing." "Then let me help properly," Eleanor insisted. "Not like this. There are services, support." "Services?" Rachel spat the word like a curse. "They just want to take my kids away, put them in the system, split them up. Is that what you want for them?" It wasn't, and the anguish in Eleanor's expression must have betrayed her. Rachel's demeanor shifted suddenly, like a weather vane in changing winds. Her voice softened, taking on a manipulative edge. "Look, you want kids, don't you? I can see it in your eyes. Never had any of your own? Here's your chance. I'm offering you a solution. You get what you want. I get what I need. And the boys get someone who actually has time for them." The coldness of the proposition left Eleanor speechless. Before she could formulate a response, a small voice came from the top of the stairs. "Is that Mum?" Oliver stood on the landing, barefoot in the borrowed t-shirt Eleanor had given him to sleep in. It hung to his knees, making him look even younger than his 11 years. Rachel immediately changed tactics. "Oliver, tell this woman to let me in. We're going home now." The terror that flashed across Oliver's face galvanized Eleanor. She turned back to Rachel. "Not tonight. The boys need stability. Come back tomorrow when we can discuss this properly." She steeled her voice. "And if you're thinking of calling the police, remember that I have your sister's contact information, and I will explain exactly what you tried to do here tonight." It was a bluff. Eleanor had no intention of involving the police yet, but it worked. Rachel's shoulders slumped. "Fine," she muttered. "Tomorrow. But my offer stands. 500 pounds. Think about it." She turned to leave, then paused. "And tell Oliver Tell him I'll see him tomorrow." Eleanor closed the door, securing the lock and chain before turning to face Oliver, who had descended the stairs and now stood in the hallway. his face a mask of conflicted emotions. "Is she gone?" he asked, his voice small. "Yes, for now," Eleanor answered honestly. "She said she'll come back tomorrow." Oliver nodded, a child too accustomed to adult problems. "She always needs money." For the bottles, Eleanor approached him slowly, unsure how much physical comfort he would accept. "Let's get you back to bed. Charlie needs you rested." The mention of his brother straightened Oliver's shoulders. He allowed Eleanor to guide him back upstairs, checking first that Charlie was still sleeping peacefully. "I won't let her take him," Oliver whispered fiercely as Eleanor tucked the blanket around them both. "He deserves better." "So do you," Eleanor replied, her heart breaking for this child forced to be a parent far too soon. Morning brought with it clarity and determination. While the boys still slept, Eleanor made several phone calls. The first was to her office, explaining a family emergency that would require a week's leave. Her position as senior editor at Millbridge Publishing afforded her some flexibility, and her assistant manager could handle the immediate deadlines. The second call was to her solicitor, Victoria Chen, an old university friend who specialized in family law. "I need advice, Vicky," Eleanor explained after recounting the previous day's events. "I can't just hand these children back to her, not after what I saw, but I have no legal standing here." "This is complicated, Ellie," Victoria replied, concern evident in her voice. "What you've described is serious neglect, possibly child endangerment, but you need to involve the proper authorities. If you don't, you could be accused of kidnapping. And if I do call social services," Victoria sighed, "they'll likely place the children in emergency foster care while they investigate. Siblings are kept together when possible, but with an infant involved, they might be separated," Eleanor finished, the knot in her stomach tightening. "It's possible," Victoria admitted. "Look, come to my office this afternoon. Bring whatever documentation you have. The mother's contact information, her sister's details, anything. We'll figure out the next steps." She paused. "Eleanor, be careful. Don't get too attached before we know what's possible here." But it was already too late for that warning. As Eleanor prepared breakfast, the sound of Charlie's morning babble drifted down from upstairs, followed by Oliver's gentle shushing. Something primal and protective had awakened in Eleanor, a fierce resolve that surprised her with its intensity. By mid-morning, Eleanor had organized a makeshift schedule. Oliver helped feed Charlie, demonstrating a competence born of necessity. Eleanor observed their routine, making mental notes of Charlie's preferences and Oliver's techniques. "He likes it when you hold the bottle like this," Oliver explained, demonstrating the proper angle. "And he gets fussy if you don't burp him right away." Eleanor followed his lead, aware that gaining Oliver's trust was as crucial as caring for Charlie. "You're very good with him," she observed. "You've been taking care of him for a long time, haven't you?" Oliver nodded, a hint of pride breaking through his wariness. "Since he was born, pretty much. Mom tried at first, but—" He trailed off, unsure how to articulate his mother's failures to a stranger. "It's a lot of responsibility for someone your age," Eleanor said carefully. "I don't mind," Oliver replied quickly, defensively. "He's my brother. That's what you do for family." The simple certainty of his statement touched Eleanor deeply. "Yes," she agreed, "that is what you do." Later, as Charlie napped, and Oliver reluctantly allowed himself to be distracted by a book from Eleanor's collection, she prepared for the meeting with Victoria. The solicitor's office was in Central Bath, a brisk 15-minute walk from Eleanor's home, but she would need to bring both boys with her. "We're going to meet a friend of mine," she explained to Oliver as she packed Charlie's diaper bag. "She's a lawyer who helps families sort out difficult situations." Oliver's guard immediately went up. "Is she going to take us away? Put us in care?" "No," Eleanor reassured him, though she couldn't promise what would happen next. "She's going to help us figure out the best way to keep you and Charlie safe and together." "With you?" Oliver asked, the hope in his voice painful to hear. Eleanor chose her words carefully. "I want that, Oliver. I want to help you both. But there are proper procedures we need to follow. What your mother suggested last night, paying her to keep you, that's not legal or right." Oliver looked down, embarrassed. "She does that sometimes. Says she'll let me stay with friends if they give her money." His voice dropped to a whisper. "No one ever pays enough to keep me for long." The casual admission of his mother's repeated attempts to essentially sell temporary custody of her son strengthened Eleanor's resolve. This meeting with Victoria wasn't just about legal advice anymore. It was about fighting for these children who had already been failed by too many adults in their short lives. As they prepared to leave for the appointment, Eleanor felt a curious mix of dread and purpose. The practical part of her brain reminded her that she was a single woman with a demanding career, hardly prepared for instant motherhood. But her heart, which had been dormant for so long, beat with a newfound rhythm, one that matched the cadence of Oliver's careful footsteps and Charlie's gentle breaths. Whatever happened next, Eleanor knew with certainty that her life had irrevocably changed the moment Oliver approached her in the market. The only question now was whether the law would allow her to become what these boys desperately needed. A mother who would stay, who would care, who would put them first. Everything their biological mother had failed to be. Victoria's office awaited, and with it, the first step in what promised to be a challenging journey through the complexities of the legal system. A system that not always recognized the bonds of the heart as readily as those of blood. The weeks following Eleanor's initial consultation with Victoria unfolded in a blur of legal appointments, home visits from social workers, and the gradual establishment of a routine with Oliver and Charlie. The spare room had transformed from a hastily arranged temporary shelter to a proper children's bedroom, with bunk beds ordered for when Charlie outgrew the cot and colorful artwork, Oliver's hesitant attempts at self-expression, adorning the walls. Autumn had settled over Bath, painting the city in amber and russet. The Georgian buildings seemed to glow with warm golden light in the afternoon sun as Eleanor pushed Charlie's pram through Royal Victoria Park, Oliver walking silently beside her. These weekend outings had become their ritual, a few hours of normalcy amid the storm of legal proceedings. "Ms. Hayworth said I might have to talk to a judge," Oliver said suddenly, kicking at a pile of fallen leaves. Sarah Hayworth was the court-appointed guardian assigned to assess the children's best interests. Eleanor nodded, choosing her words carefully. "That's possible. The judge wants to hear from everyone involved before making any decisions about where you and Charlie will live permanently. What if I mess it up?" Fear crept into Oliver's voice. What if I say the wrong thing and they send us back to Mum? Or split us up? Eleanor stopped walking and knelt to meet Oliver's eyes, mindful of the pram with the now sleeping Charlie. "Listen to me, Oliver. You can't mess this up. All you need to do is tell the truth about what life was like with your mother and what life has been like these past few weeks." She gently squeezed his shoulder. "Your voice matters in that. More than you might realize." Oliver nodded, not entirely convinced, but somewhat reassured. As they resumed walking, he asked, "Have you heard from Mum?" Eleanor hesitated. Rachel had made several appearances in the early days, alternating between tearful pleas for another chance and furious demands for money. The temporary custody order had stipulated supervised visits twice weekly, but Rachel had attended only 3 in the past month, each time arriving late and leaving early. "Not since last week," Eleanor admitted. Ms. Hayworth tried to contact her for the scheduled visit, but she trailed off, not wanting to pile more disappointment onto Oliver's shoulders. "She's not coming back, is she?" It wasn't really a question. Oliver's tone carried the resignation of a child who had grown accustomed to abandonment. "I don't know," Eleanor answered honestly. "But whatever happens with your mother, You need to know that you and Charlie deserve stability and care. That's what all of us, the social workers, Victoria, me, that's what we're trying to ensure. As they rounded the corner near the botanical gardens, a familiar figure appeared on the path ahead. James Harrington, Eleanor's ex-husband. His presence in Bath was no coincidence. He had moved back from London 3 months ago, allegedly for a position at the university, but pursuing reconciliation with Eleanor with single-minded determination. "Eleanor," he called, his handsome face breaking into a smile as he approached. "I thought that might be you." His gaze shifted to Oliver and the pram. "And these must be the boys you mentioned." Eleanor felt Oliver shift closer to her side, instinctively protective. "James, I didn't know you frequented this part of the park. Sabbatical research has its perks. Flexible hours, leisurely walks." He bent slightly to address Oliver. "Hello there. I'm James, an old friend of Eleanor's." Oliver mumbled a reluctant greeting, pressing himself against Eleanor's side. "We were just heading home," Eleanor said, making to move past him. James fell into step beside them. "I'll walk with you. We haven't had a proper chance to talk since you acquired a family." The slight emphasis on the word acquired wasn't lost on Eleanor. "This isn't the time, James." "When is the time, then?" He kept his voice light, but Eleanor could detect the undercurrent of frustration. "You've been avoiding me for weeks. Dinners canceled, calls unreturned." "I've been rather busy," Eleanor replied pointedly, nodding toward the boys. James lowered his voice. "Ellie, be reasonable. You've known these children for what, a month? You're risking everything, your career, your reputation, your savings, for a quixotic rescue mission." Oliver's body tensed beside her. Though James had tried to speak quietly, the boy had clearly heard enough to understand the gist. "We'll discuss this another time," Eleanor said firmly, stopping at the park exit. "Goodbye, James." He caught her elbow as she turned to leave. "Just think about what I said, about us. We could still have the life we planned. Travel, freedom, advancing our careers. These aren't even your children." Eleanor pulled her arm free, anger flaring. "These are exactly my children," she said, her voice low but fierce. "And any life that doesn't include them isn't one I'm interested in anymore." The walk home was quiet, Oliver lost in thought, and Eleanor trying to calm her racing heart. James's words, though infuriating, had articulated doubts that occasionally whispered in her own mind during sleepless nights. Was she being impulsive? Trying to fill the void of her infertility with a ready-made family? Could she really provide what these boys needed long-term? Back at the house, as Eleanor prepared dinner and Oliver helped set the table, a domestic scene that would have been unimaginable 2 months ago, Victoria called with news. "We've got a court date," her friend announced without preamble. 3 weeks from Tuesday. Rachel's solicitor finally filed their response to our petition. Eleanor stepped into the study for privacy. "And?" "She's contesting the permanent guardianship application, claims she's enrolled in a rehabilitation program, and wants the children returned to her care." Eleanor's heart sank. "Is she actually in rehab?" "Allegedly started last week," Victoria replied, skepticism evident in her tone. "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Just as we're advancing with the guardianship petition." "Do you think the court will favor her?" Eleanor asked, watching through the doorway, as Oliver carefully folded napkins, showing Charlie how to make them into simple shapes, though the baby was far too young to understand. "She's the biological mother, Ellie. The court's default position is family reunification whenever possible." Victoria's voice softened. "But don't lose heart. We have substantial evidence of neglect, and Oliver's testimony will carry significant weight. Plus, the fact that Rachel has missed most of her supervised visits doesn't help her case." After ending the call, Eleanor returned to the kitchen, forcing a smile. "Dinner's almost ready. Oliver, Would you mind getting Charlie settled in his high chair? The boy complied, lifting his brother with practiced ease. Was that your lawyer friend? Did something happen? Eleanor marveled at his perceptiveness. Yes, that was Victoria. We have a court date next month. Oliver nodded solemnly. Is Mum trying to get us back? She's filed paperwork saying that's what she wants, Eleanor acknowledged, placing the shepherd's pie on the table. But many factors will be considered before any decision is made. She won't stay in rehab, Oliver said, with the certainty of experience. She never does. She always says she's getting better. And then, he trailed off, concentrating intensely on securing Charlie's bib. Eleanor sat down beside him. Whatever happens, I promise, I'll do everything I can to keep you both safe and together. Oliver looked up, his eyes showing a vulnerability he rarely allowed. Would you still want us if the court says no? If we have to go back to Mum, but then if she starts drinking again? Oliver, Eleanor said firmly, I will always want you and Charlie. No court decision can change that. That evening, as the boys slept, Eleanor found herself in the small room she had set up as a workshop at the back of the house. Her grandfather's old whittling tools, untouched for years, lay on the workbench beside blocks of lime wood and oak. Since the boys had arrived, she had found herself drawn back to this childhood hobby. First creating a simple rattle for Charlie, then a set of wooden animals for Oliver. Her fingers traced the outline of her current project, a miniature sailing boat, similar to the one that had caught her eye at the market on that fateful Sunday. The repetitive motion of carving was meditative, allowing her mind to process the day's events and the challenges ahead. The irony wasn't lost on her that in trying to save these boys, she had found pieces of herself long forgotten. Her creativity, dormant during her marriage to James, had reawakened. The publishing work that had once consumed her now seemed merely a job rather than an identity. A soft knock at the workshop door interrupted her thoughts. Oliver stood in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep. I heard sounds, he explained, eyeing the tools and wood curiously. What are you making? A boat, Eleanor replied, setting down her carving knife. My grandfather taught me how when I was about your age. It helps me think. Oliver stepped closer, examining the half-formed vessel. My dad used to make things too. Before he left, he was a carpenter. It was the first time Oliver had mentioned his father. Eleanor treaded carefully. Would you like to learn? I could teach you. The boy hesitated, then nodded. Not tonight, though. Charlie might wake up. Not tonight, Eleanor agreed. But tomorrow, perhaps. We could start with something simple. As she guided Oliver back to bed, checking on Charlie, who slumbered peacefully in his cot, Eleanor felt something settle within her. A quiet certainty amidst the legal turmoil. These moments, these small connections forming day by day, were building something as tangible as the wooden boat taking shape on her workbench. The court might rule against her. Rachel might make good on her promises of rehabilitation. James might be right about the practical complications of sudden parenthood. But in this moment, in this house slowly transforming from a place of solitude to a home filled with life, Eleanor knew that some risks were worth taking, some bonds worth fighting for. The wooden boat would be completed in time, its craftsmanship telling the story of patience and persistence. Whether the family they were building would be granted the same chance to reach completion remained in the hands of a system that sometimes valued blood ties over emotional bonds. A system Eleanor was now prepared to challenge with every resource at her disposal. For Oliver and Charlie, for the family they were becoming, she would navigate these turbulent legal waters with the same steady hand that guided her carving knife. Deliberate, determined, and driven by love that had found her when she least expected it, but needed it most. Hold it like this, Eleanor guided Oliver's hands on the small carving tool, and always cut away from yourself, never toward. The boy's tongue poked out from between his teeth as he concentrated on the piece of lime wood, carefully shaving away tiny curls to reveal the shape of a small fox emerging from the block. It was Saturday morning, and Charlie babbled happily from his playpen in the corner of Eleanor's workshop, batting at colorful wooden rings suspended above him. The weekend workshop sessions had become sacred time for all three of them over the past 2 weeks, a space where worries about court hearings and custody battles temporarily receded. "I think I'm doing it wrong," Oliver frowned as his knife slipped, creating an unintended groove in the fox's back. "There's no wrong in art," Eleanor reassured him. "That's just a detail we didn't plan for. See?" She pointed to the mark. "That could be the beginning of a saddle." "A saddle?" "Foxes don't wear saddles," Oliver protested, but his frown had softened into concentration again. "This one might. Perhaps it's a magical fox that carries fairy children through the forest at night." Eleanor smiled as Oliver's imagination visibly caught fire. "And it needs the saddle because fairy wings would get crushed if they sat directly on its back," he continued, now purposefully carving the accidental groove into a more deliberate shape. Eleanor watched him work, marveling at the transformation in the boy since that first day at the market. Though still guarded with strangers and sometimes prone to nightmares, Oliver had begun to display flashes of childhood wonder, moments when the weight of premature responsibility lifted from his small shoulders. The court date loomed just 9 days away, casting a shadow over these peaceful interludes. Oliver knew this, of course. Despite Eleanor's efforts to shield him from adult concerns, he had an uncanny ability to sense the undercurrents of tension. His nightmares had increased as the date approached. Twice this week, Eleanor had found him in Charlie's room, sleeping on the floor beside the cot, as if afraid his brother might disappear in the night. "Do you think we could sell these?" Oliver's question pulled Eleanor from her worried thoughts. "Sell what?" "The things we make." He gestured toward the shelf where their growing collection of wooden creatures stood. Eleanor's expertly carved animals alongside Oliver's more rudimentary but earnest creations. "Mrs. Winters used to take me to this shop near the Abbey. They sold handmade toys, but none as good as these." Eleanor considered the idea. She had taken a leave of absence from the publishing house, initially for 2 weeks, but now extended indefinitely. Her savings were substantial, but not inexhaustible, especially with the mounting legal fees. "That's actually not a bad thought," she said, examining the carved menagerie. "People do value handcrafted toys, especially with Christmas approaching." Oliver's face brightened. "I could help. With the sanding and painting parts, at least." Eleanor felt a sudden surge of inspiration, not just for a hobby or temporary income source, but for something more significant. "You know, my grandfather didn't just make toys for fun. He had a small shop in Cornwall. Blackwood's Treasures, he called it." "Like your last name," Oliver noted. "Exactly. He taught me everything I know about woodworking." Eleanor picked up a nearly finished sailing boat from her workbench. This design was his specialty. The memory of her grandfather's weathered hands guiding hers, much as she now guided Oliver's, created a sense of continuity that felt right. A lineage of craft and care that transcended biological connections. "We could call it Blackwood and Helpers," Oliver suggested, his usual caution momentarily forgotten in the excitement of the idea. "Or, perhaps, Blackwood and Sons," Eleanor said softly, the words slipping out before she could consider their weight. Oliver went very still, his hands pausing on the half-carved fox. "Sons?" he repeated, the single word laden with questions he seemed afraid to articulate. Eleanor set down her tools, giving him her full attention. "Oliver, no matter what happens in court next week, you and Charlie have become family to me. I hope you know that." The boy's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but he blinked them back stubbornly. "What if they make us go back to Mum? Then we'll find a way to stay connected," Eleanor promised. But Victoria, my lawyer friend, she's very good at her job. And we have strong evidence that the best place for you both is here. Oliver nodded, returning to his carving with renewed focus, though Eleanor could see the emotion working through him in the tightness of his shoulders. Change the subject, she thought. Give him space to process. So, a business, she said brightly. We'd need to think about what kinds of toys to make, how to price them, where to sell them. By lunchtime, what had begun as a casual suggestion had evolved into a proper plan. Eleanor set up her laptop on the kitchen table. Charlie, now in his high chair, gnawing contentedly on a wooden teething ring she had made him. The Christmas market in Milsom Place starts in 3 weeks, she read from the local events website. Stall applications close on Monday. Is that enough time to make stuff to sell? Oliver asked, spreading peanut butter on his sandwich with careful concentration. If we focus on smaller items at first, animals, boats, simple puzzles, we could have enough stock, Eleanor replied, and we could take custom orders for more complex pieces to be ready before Christmas. As they ate, they sketched out designs on napkins, calculated rough costs, and debated business names. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by Charlie's occasional happy shrieks. It was during this planning session that Eleanor's phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. I need to take this, she said to Oliver, stepping into the hallway. Hello? Ellie, we have a situation. Victoria's normally composed voice held an edge of urgency. Rachel missed her scheduled drug test yesterday, the one ordered by the court. Eleanor felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. What does that mean for the hearing? On its own, it would strengthen our case, Victoria replied. But there's more. She showed up at the social services office this morning with James. James? Eleanor repeated, certain she had misheard. My James? My ex-husband? The very same. According to Sarah Hayworth, he presented himself as a character witness for Rachel, claiming she's been unfairly portrayed and that her rehabilitation efforts are genuine. Eleanor leaned against the wall, trying to process this betrayal. That's absurd. He's never even met her before. Well, they seemed quite familiar today, Victoria said grimly. He also made some concerning insinuations about your mental state, suggested that you're using the children to fill a void after your infertility diagnosis. The words struck like physical blows. James knew exactly where to aim to cause maximum damage, exploiting her most vulnerable insecurities and twisting them into weapons. Why would he do this? Eleanor whispered, though she already knew. James couldn't accept rejection, couldn't comprehend that she had chosen a path that excluded him. Spite, most likely, Victoria replied bluntly. Or he genuinely believes he's helping you by trying to save you from yourself. Either way, we need to address it before the hearing. I've requested a meeting with the judge and guardian ad litem for Monday morning. Can you make it? Of course. Eleanor glanced toward the kitchen where Oliver was entertaining Charlie, making the wooden animals dance across the high chair tray. Should I bring the boys? Not for this. It's better if they're not exposed to these allegations. After ending the call, Eleanor returned to the kitchen, forcing a calm expression that she didn't feel. Was that about the court thing? Oliver asked immediately. Eleanor nodded, unwilling to lie but careful with the details. Just some procedural matters we need to sort out. Nothing for you to worry about. Oliver studied her face with his too perceptive gaze. It's my mom, isn't it? She's done something. There are just some new developments we need to address, Eleanor said, sitting down beside him. But our plans haven't changed. In fact, she pulled the laptop closer, a new determination settling over her. I think we should submit that market application today. Oliver's eyebrows rose. Really? But what if? What if we win the case? Eleanor finished for him. Then we'll have a wonderful new venture to celebrate with. And if things go differently than we hope, we'll still have created something special together. She squeezed his shoulder gently. Some bonds can't be broken by court decisions, Oliver. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Eleanor returned to her workshop. Instead of picking up her carving tools, she sat at the workbench and opened a fresh notebook. At the top of the page, she wrote Blackwood and Sons and underlined it twice. Below, she began to outline not just a business plan, but a vision for a future that had seemed impossible months ago. A future with these boys as permanent parts of her life. A career that allowed her to be present for them while pursuing her rediscovered passion. A home filled with creativity and security. It was a defiant act, this planning, a refusal to accept that James's vindictiveness or Rachel's erratic behavior could derail what had begun that Sunday in the market. As Eleanor sketched designs for a business logo, a stylized tree with 2 branches representing the boys, she knew she was also crafting something less tangible but infinitely more precious, a foundation for the family they were becoming, regardless of what legal documents might eventually say. The sailing boat on her workbench, nearly complete now, served as a reminder that the journey ahead might face rough waters, but with careful craftsmanship and steady hands, they could navigate through. The business, like the boat, would be built piece by piece, with attention to detail and an eye toward the horizon, a shared project that bound them together beyond biology or court rulings. Whether Blackwood and Sons became a formal legal reality or remained a private truth between them, Eleanor was certain of one thing. The work of these hands, this heart, this makeshift family, was creating something authentic and enduring. A legacy of love expressed through wood and care and presence. A different kind of parenthood than she had once envisioned, but no less real for its unconventional beginnings. The Bath family court building stood imposingly on North Parade, its Victorian facade a stark contrast to the elegant Georgian architecture that dominated most of the city. Eleanor, dressed in a conservative navy suit, gripped Victoria's hand briefly before they entered, drawing strength from her friend's reassuring squeeze. "Remember what we discussed," Victoria murmured. "Stay calm, answer honestly, and focus on the boys' well-being rather than Rachel's shortcomings. Judge Hargrove appreciates measured responses." Eleanor nodded, her throat too tight for words. The past week had been a blur of preparations, meetings with the guardian ad litem, filing character references from colleagues and neighbors, gathering documentation of the stable home environment she had created. Through it all, she had maintained a facade of confidence for Oliver's sake. But now, facing the reality of the courtroom, doubt crept in like a winter chill. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Eleanor had imagined, with polished wooden benches and austere lighting. She scanned the room, her heart stuttering when she spotted Rachel sitting with her solicitor. The woman looked markedly different from their previous encounters. Her hair neatly styled, wearing a modest blouse and skirt that Eleanor suspected had been purchased specifically for this appearance. Beside her sat James, his expression unreadable as their eyes met briefly. The sight of her ex-husband alongside Rachel, a calculated alliance aimed at undermining her, sent a surge of anger through Eleanor. She tamped it down, remembering Victoria's advice. Emotions would not help her case today. Oliver and Charlie were absent, as was standard procedure. They waited with a court-appointed caregiver in a separate room, to be brought in only if the judge required Oliver's testimony. The thought of the boys sitting in a sterile waiting room, Oliver undoubtedly hypervigilant, protective arms around his baby brother, strengthened Eleanor's resolve. "All rise," the clerk announced as Judge Marian Hargrove entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair cropped close to her head and reading glasses perched on her nose. The proceedings began with formulaic introductions and statements of purpose. This was not a full trial, but a custody hearing to determine temporary arrangements, while a more comprehensive assessment could be completed. The distinction offered little comfort to Eleanor. Even temporary decisions could profoundly impact the children's stability. Rachel's solicitor spoke first, painting a portrait of a struggling mother who had made mistakes but was committed to rehabilitation. "My client has completed 4 weeks of an outpatient treatment program," the solicitor stated, "and has secured appropriate housing with the assistance of Ms. Rachel's sister in Bristol. She is ready and able to resume care of her children with proper support services in place." Eleanor watched Rachel during this speech, noting how the woman kept her eyes downcast, occasionally nodding at appropriate moments. It was a performance, Eleanor thought, though she immediately chastised herself for the uncharitable assessment. Perhaps Rachel truly was trying to change. When James was called as a character witness for Rachel, Eleanor felt Victoria tense beside her. "Mr. Harrington," Rachel's solicitor began, "you've known Ms. Blackwood for many years. Could you share your observations regarding her recent involvement with these children?" James straightened his tie before responding. "Eleanor has always wanted children," he said, his voice carrying the polished cadence of academia. "During our marriage, her inability to conceive became something of an obsession. When traditional methods failed, she became increasingly desperate." Eleanor dug her fingernails into her palms, forcing herself to maintain a neutral expression. "And how would you characterize her current situation with the children in question?" James sighed, as if reluctant to continue. "I believe Eleanor sees these children as her last chance at motherhood. While her intentions may be kind, her actions demonstrate a concerning impulsivity and disregard for proper channels. These children already have a mother who, by all accounts, is working to address her problems." The betrayal stung, but beneath the hurt, Eleanor recognized the wounded ego driving James's testimony. Their last encounter in the park had made it clear that she had chosen a path that excluded him, and this was his retaliation. Victoria's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Harrington, when was the last time you were in a romantic relationship with Ms. Blackwood?" "We divorced 3 years ago," James admitted. "And have you had any regular contact with Ms. Blackwood in the past year?" "We've spoken occasionally. Have you ever met the children in question prior to today?" "Briefly, in passing." "Have you observed Ms. Blackwood's interactions with these children in any meaningful way?" James shifted uncomfortably. "Not extensively, no. Yet you feel qualified to assess her motivations and capabilities as their caregiver?" "I know Eleanor," he insisted. "We were married for 8 years. Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "Then you'll be aware that during your marriage, Ms. Blackwood was a well-respected professional who managed a team of 20 at one of Britain's most prestigious publishing houses, that she maintained your joint household finances with exemplary care, that she was described by your mutual friends as level-headed and thoughtful." When James had no rebuttal, Victoria continued, "No further questions, Your Honor." Eleanor's testimony came next. Victoria guided her through accounts of finding the children, the evidence of neglect, and the stable environment she had established. They presented Charlie's improved developmental markers, Oliver's regular school attendance since living with Eleanor, and statements from teachers noting positive changes in his behavior and engagement. Throughout, Eleanor forced herself to speak of Rachel with compassion. "I believe Ms. Price loves her children," she said carefully. "But love alone cannot provide the stability and care that Oliver and Charlie need. I'm not seeking to replace her in their lives, but to ensure they have the security they deserve while she addresses her own challenges." Rachel's solicitor pressed hard during cross-examination, questioning Eleanor's motives and experience. "You have no training in child care? No previous experience raising children? You seized upon a vulnerable moment to insert yourself into this family's life. Some might call that opportunistic, Ms. Blackwood." The accusation stung, but Eleanor met it directly. "I responded to children in need. Every action since has been taken with their welfare as my only consideration. And your newly established business venture, this Blackwood & Sons, that has nothing to do with creating a narrative that positions you as their parent? Eleanor hesitated, aware of the trap. The business grew organically from teaching Oliver woodworking skills, something that has given him pride and confidence. The name was chosen to reflect my hope for their future, yes, but the activity itself has been therapeutic for all of us. By mid-afternoon, Sarah Hayworth, the guardian ad litem, presented her assessment, which largely favored Eleanor's petition for continued custody. The children have thrived in Ms. Blackwood's care, she noted. Particularly concerning is Oliver's consistent statement that he feels safe for the first time in years. Rachel's testimony was the last before the final decision. She spoke softly, her hands trembling slightly as she described her struggles with addiction following the departure of the children's father. I made terrible mistakes, she admitted, but I've been sober for 6 weeks now. I love my children. They belong with me. During cross-examination, Victoria carefully established the pattern of Rachel's previous rehabilitation attempts and subsequent relapses. The history undermined her claims of transformation, though Eleanor took no pleasure in watching the younger woman's composure crumble under questioning. After a brief recess, Judge Hargrove announced she wished to speak with Oliver directly. Eleanor's heart raced as the boy was brought into the courtroom, looking small and solemn in his best clothes. Charlie remained with the caregiver, deemed too young to participate. The judge spoke gently to Oliver, explaining that she needed his help to make an important decision. I'm going to ask you some questions, and all you need to do is tell me the truth, all right? There are no wrong answers here. Oliver nodded, his eyes flicking nervously between his mother and Eleanor. Oliver, can you tell me what it was like living with your mom before you went to stay with Ms. Blackwood? The boy swallowed hard. It was hard, sometimes. Mom was sad a lot. She slept during the day, and sometimes there wasn't much food. I had to learn how to make bottles for Charlie when he was born. And how has it been living with Ms. Blackwood? Oliver's posture relaxed slightly. Good. She makes sure we have proper meals and helps me with homework. She taught me to make things from wood, like my grandfather taught her. And she always checks on Charlie in the night, so I don't have to anymore. If you could choose where to live right now, what would you want? The question hung in the air. Eleanor held her breath, aware that Oliver was being asked to choose between 2 adults he cared for, an impossible burden for a child. Oliver glanced at his mother, guilt etched across his young face. I love my mom, he said quietly. But, he paused, gathering courage. Charlie needs someone who won't forget to feed him or leave him alone. And I need to go to school every day, not just when someone remembers to wake us up. Rachel made a small, pained sound from her seat. Oliver continued, his voice growing steadier. Eleanor says that being a parent means being there every day, not just when it's easy. She says it's about putting someone else first, always. He looked directly at the judge then, with a wisdom beyond his years. I think maybe a mom isn't just who gave you life. It's who makes sure you have a good life. Every day. Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes at this echo of the boy's words from their early conversations. Beside her, Victoria quickly passed her a tissue. Thank you, Oliver. Judge Hargrove said kindly, You've been very helpful and very brave. After Oliver was escorted out, the judge removed her glasses and addressed the courtroom. I've heard sufficient testimony to make a temporary ruling, pending further assessment. This court recognizes Ms. Price's biological connection to these children and her stated desire to improve her circumstances. However, the welfare of the children must be my primary consideration. Eleanor held her breath as Judge Hargrove continued. Therefore, I am granting temporary custody of Oliver and Charles Price to Eleanor Blackwood for a period of 6 months. during which time Ms. Price may continue her rehabilitation and establish a stable living situation. Supervised visitation will be arranged weekly, contingent upon Ms. Price's continued sobriety and compliance with treatment. Relief washed over Eleanor so powerfully that she nearly missed the judge's final statements. Furthermore, if Ms. Blackwood wishes to pursue legal guardianship or adoption at the end of this period, this court will consider such application favorably, provided the current positive trajectory continues. The children's evident attachment to Ms. Blackwood, alongside Oliver's clear articulation of his needs and preferences, weighs heavily in this determination. Outside the courtroom, Eleanor found Oliver waiting with Charlie in the caregiver's arms. The baby squealed with delight at the sight of her, reaching pudgy hands in her direction. Oliver hung back, uncertainty written across his features. "We can go home," Eleanor told him softly. "All of us." The tension visibly drained from Oliver's shoulders, but before he could respond, Rachel approached, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "Oliver," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I heard what you said in there." The boy fidgeted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, Mom." Rachel shook her head. "No, don't be sorry. You were right." She glanced at Eleanor, something like resignation in her expression. "I haven't been the mother you deserve. Either of you." She reached out tentatively to touch Charlie's cheek. "I'm going to try to get better. Really better this time." Eleanor stepped back, giving mother and children a moment of privacy. She caught sight of James watching from a distance and felt a pang of something almost like pity. He had misunderstood so fundamentally what she had found with these children. Not a replacement for what she couldn't have, but something entirely new and precious. Victoria joined her, squeezing her arm in congratulation. 6 months is a good start, and with Rachel's history, if she relapses again, let's hope she doesn't, Eleanor said quietly, for her sake as well as the boys. A week later, as November deepened toward winter, Eleanor stood behind a small stall in Milsom Place, watching Oliver carefully wrap a customer's purchase, a carved fox with a tiny fairy saddle. Charlie babbled from his carrier on Eleanor's chest, reaching for the colorful wooden mobile hanging above the display. Blackwood and Sons read the banner above their stall, the ampersand curving gracefully between the words. The Christmas market bustled around them, the scent of mulled wine and cinnamon mixing with the crisp winter air. "Good job," Eleanor praised as Oliver counted out change for the customer. "You're becoming quite the shopkeeper." Oliver beamed at the compliment, a smile that reached his eyes in a way that had been rare when they first met. In the 2 months since that chance encounter in the market, he had begun the slow transformation from a child burdened with adult responsibilities to a boy who occasionally remembered how to play. As the evening crowd thinned, Eleanor boxed up the remaining items, mentally tallying their sales. The business was modest but growing, with several custom orders already placed for Christmas. More important than the income was the sense of purpose and collaboration it had fostered, a shared project that bound them together as family in a way no court could fully recognize or diminish. Rachel had attended her first supervised visit the previous day, bringing small gifts for both boys and maintaining sobriety. Whether this attempt at rehabilitation would succeed where others had failed remained to be seen. But Eleanor found herself hoping for the best. Oliver deserved a mother who was healthy enough to love him properly, even if that relationship evolved differently than traditionally expected. "Eleanor?" Oliver's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" she asked, securing Charlie more comfortably against her chest. "The judge said we're staying with you for at least 6 months." "That's right. And after that, if she still can't take care of us properly, we might stay with you permanently?" Eleanor nodded, wary of making promises beyond her control. "That's what we're hoping for, if that's what you want too." Oliver fiddled with a small carved boat, one of the first pieces they had created together. If that happens, would it be okay if... Would it be weird if I called you Mum? Not right away, but someday? Eleanor's heart swelled with an emotion so profound, it momentarily stole her breath. That wouldn't be weird at all, she managed finally. That would be the greatest honor of my life, Oliver. But only when you're ready, and only if it feels right to you. The boy nodded solemnly, processing this. Charlie's too little to remember anything else. He already thinks you're his mum. As if acknowledging his name, Charlie cooed and patted Eleanor's cheek with a drool-covered hand. I think, Eleanor said carefully, that people can have different kinds of mothers in their lives. Your birth mother will always be important, and if she gets better, she'll be part of your life too. Love isn't something that gets used up or divided. It grows to fit what we need. Oliver considered this, wisdom beyond his years evident in his thoughtful expression. Like our fox carvings, we keep making them different, but they're all still foxes. Exactly like that, Eleanor agreed, touched by the perfect simplicity of his analogy. As they packed the last of their crafts and prepared to head home, a word that had taken on new depth and meaning in recent months, Eleanor felt a sense of completion that had eluded her throughout her adult life. The path to motherhood had not resembled anything she had imagined during her years of trying to conceive, yet it had found her nonetheless, in the most unexpected way, on an ordinary Sunday in an ordinary market. Family, she had learned, was not always born of blood, but cultivated through choice and commitment and daily acts of love. It was built like their wooden creations, carefully, deliberately, with patience and attention to detail. It emerged from raw materials into something beautiful and unique. And like the sailing boats her grandfather had taught her to carve, it could weather unexpected storms and still find its way to safe harbor. With Oliver walking beside her and Charlie nestled against her heart, Eleanor left the Christmas market behind, stepping into the gentle snowfall that had begun to dust the ancient streets of Bath. The winter light caught on the honey-colored stone of the buildings, casting a warm glow that seemed to illuminate not just the path home, but the future stretching before them. Uncertain in its details, but secure in its foundation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, court appearances, supervised visits, the complex navigation of blended families, they would face them together. This unlikely trio who had found in each other exactly what they most needed: belonging.